Hi guys, it's Debbie, and today I would like to speak about one of my favourite films, which is The Devil's Advocate, directed by Taylor Hackford and starring Keanu Reeves, Al Pacino and a very young Charlize Theron. In particular today I would like to give a full explanation of this film's plot and discuss about the main themes it covers. There will be spoilers ahead, so I wouldn't recommend watching this video if you haven't seen the film. Now let's start by taking a look at the general plot. The main character is Kevin Lomax, an ambitious lawyer which wins every case, including very controversial ones, for example defending a child molester. His successful career eventually leads him to work for the rich and influential John Milton, head of an important firm in New York City. Here Kevin's career becomes even more successful, and his ever-growing salary allows him and his wife Marianne to enjoy a wealthy lifestyle, buy a huge house, attend parties and so on. But while Kevin's excessive pride makes him thrive in this environment and greedily demand more of it, Marianne starts to feel lonely. She misses her simple life back in her hometown. She feels she can't make any new friends and progressively becomes more and more paranoid and depressed. Everybody around her appears cold, distant, and she receives subtle insinuations that her body is not perfect enough, that she should appear more fierce and seductive. Kevin's cases become more and more controversial, and he also soon starts to become tired of Marianne's attitude. As a matter of fact, he is tempted by more adventurous women, for example co-worker Christabella. So while Marianne's loneliness soon slips into paranoia, depression and visions, Kevin slowly starts to drift away from her. But soon we discover that all this situation of depression, temptation and sadness was created by John Milton, which we discover to be not only Kevin's boss but also his father. The film also reveals that Milton represents Satan. He has lived on Earth before the beginning of time, influencing men into committing terrible crimes or condoning them, just like a ruthless lawyer would do. Milton had a son, Kevin, and a daughter, Christabella, and his dream would be of creating an antichrist by forcing them to have a child together. Christabella was already aware of this. As a matter of fact, she had repeatedly tried to seduce Kevin. She appeared in his fantasies, on the contrary of the pure and innocent Marianne, which represents the good at heart angelic woman. To push Marianne out of Kevin's life, Milton had started planting ideas in her head, tormenting her, making her feel useless, not good enough, and also probably making her feel guilty for not being able to have children. For example, she has a vision of a child holding her ovaries. She is driven to insanity to the point of committing suicide. Once Marianne is dead, Milton tries to convince Kevin to follow him on his plans, but Kevin prefers to commit suicide rather than comply to his father's demonic ideals. When Kevin shoots himself, he doesn't die, but instead he wakes up at the beginning of the film when he was defending the child molester. He understands everything he saw was an idea of how things would go on if he continued his life in this manner. So he refuses to continue defending his client and leaves with his happy wife Marianne. Outside the courtroom he meets a reporter which offers to interview him and make a star out of him, and Kevin agrees, proving he will always be tempted by the idea of success and fame and indulge in vanity. The reporter then reveals himself to be Milton, which says, "Vanity definitely my favourite sin." Milton says this because according to religious tradition, Satan originally was an angel, Lucifer, which was banished from heaven because of his vanity and his desires to be better than God. He was thrown down on earth to live a hellish life, tempting other people into committing his same mistakes. At the end of the film, Kevin survives either because of his self-sacrifice, by which God granted him a second chance back on earth where he could make up for his mistakes, or because Milton decided to leave freedom of choice and not be like God, which he describes as a monstrous creature which sits on his throne and just dictates rules, not giving humans any possibility of choice. In his insanity, maybe Milton decided to give a second chance. In any case, the devil is back again, incessantly trying to corrupt Kevin's soul. A third interpretation is more of a metaphor, because this film is packed to the brim with symbolism, even from the most insignificant details. For example, Milton preferring to travel underground, so Satan underground, or the huge fireplace in his office, or even just the symbols of crosses or writing such as Halo in the background. But even if we watch this film without trying to retrace everything back to a religious reference and read everything as a big metaphor, it is all a reference to ethical choices and fighting our own inner demons, because everything Kevin witnessed could also just be a metaphorical vision vision of what his life was becoming, of how twisted and sick his nature was becoming because of pride and greed. So this film could be analysed as a discussion surrounding our own personal sins. Marianne's mental degradation instead can be read as the idea of a woman which is abused on a daily basis. Seen in terms of a modern society, she is destroyed every day with harsh comments about changing her body, of being more seductive and not so innocent, being more fierce, cutting her hair, changing the colour of her hair, and in general abandoning her moral principles. Because in a modern society, beauty is the first temptation. Everybody in Milton's social circle is absolutely stunning with perfect faces, perfect bodies, because lust, beauty, vanity and pride are considered the highest values. Milton represents the egocentric man which has to show his authority by showing off his building, his wealth, telling the number of women he has slept with, influencing other people to jealously copy him. But if we were to analyse this film through religious analogies, all the main characters represent references to philosophical, biblical or historical figures. Marianne represents Mary, the angelic, good at heart, pure and innocent woman. Kevin represents the simple human which is tempted by sin. He sometimes has a strong personality, probably because he inherited part of it from his father, but at the same time his soul is empty and easily corrupted by the temptation of sin. He could maybe be a reference to Adam. Satan is called John Milton, just like the poet which wrote about Satan, about his rebellion, about him being banished on earth, about Adam and Eve, and whose works covered topics such as guilt, shame and lustful sex within a religious context. He also directly quotes Milton by saying that better reign in hell than serve in heaven. In general, with this film, I try to follow the main interpretation, which is just that of Milton being Satan and tempting Kevin. But in general, the religious tradition and the religious scripts and the supernatural elements they contain are always a very pushed metaphor of our mundane life and the consequences of being corrupted by evil. Let me know what your thoughts are about The Devil's Advocate with a comment here below, and also if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for many more about TV series and films. See you soon. Bye.